Peter Drucker, a great management thinker of all time, taught me this. He said, the leader of the past knew how to tell, the leader of the future knows how to ask. Today, you manage people no more than you do. You can't tell them what to do and how to do it. You have to ask, you have to listen, you have to learn, you have to be a human being.
This episode of Leading the Future of Work is sponsored by HiBob. If you're stuck in a rut with all this new world of work, quiet quitting, remote work, talent retention stuff, then you've got to meet Bob. Bob is a modern HR platform from HiBob that is built for the way companies need to work today. It's simple and intuitive. You can customize, automate, and create workflows for onboarding in a click. And there's more. If you are a multinational global company, you can also customize just about anything, including calendars, holidays, currency, and regulations. Connect with HiBob and see what Bob can do for your company. They also created a free guide to bridge the global gap and adapt to the modern world, which covers using the right technology, inclusivity, and using modern HR tools. You can get access to this free guide at hibob.com/FOW. Again, that's www.hibob.com/FOW. Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Leading the Future of Work. My guest today, a repeat guest, but he hasn't been on the show in many, many years, Marshall Goldsmith, America's #1 executive coach. He's also one of the top 10 business thinkers in the world and author of several best-selling books, including a brand new one called The Earned Life, Lose Regret, Choose Fulfillment. And combined, his books have sold over 3 million copies. Marshall, thank you for joining me.
Thank you so much for inviting me. Honored to be here.
I was, before I hit the record button, I was showing this book that you wrote the foreword to on employee experience more than half a decade ago. So it's crazy how fast time flies. I read that you recently relocated, right? So what have you been up to lately? You moved from San Diego, I believe, to Nashville?
Yeah, I lived in Rancho Santa Fe, California, in the same house for 30 years.
Wow.
And then COVID kicks in. So we got a condo in La Jolla, lived on the beach for a year and a half, not knowing it would last a year and a half. And now I live in Nashville. My daughter's a professor here at Vanderbilt, and I got some grandkids here. So now I live here in Nashville, Tennessee for the last year and a half. So I love it here. It's fun.
Wow. Did you move to be near the grandkids?
Yeah.
Well, very cool. I mean, I've been to Nashville a few times. I know it's a fun spot, so I'm sure you're enjoying yourself out there. Why don't we jump right into some of the stuff that you've been involved with lately, the new book, obviously, but a lot of people know you as being an executive coach, and I thought it would be really interesting to go way back to baby Marshall and tell us a little bit about how you got involved with executive coaching and what were you doing before you were an executive coach?
Well, what happened is I wasn't doing much of anything. I was attitudinally challenged as a child, as hard as this may be to believe. And, I really kind of got by school. I was always reasonably bright, so I could kind of stumble my way through. I ironically am going to be awarded an honorary doctorate and speak at the commencement of my alma mater, which is amazing since it's a miracle I graduated at all.
Wow.
I was, like I said, a bad attitude for a lot of years. So then finally, I kind of got a PhD just trying to avoid reality. So I thought I'll keep going in school. So I got a PhD from UCLA. And then per chance, I met a very famous man named Dr. Paul Hersey. And he was one of the highest paid consultants in the world in our field, probably the highest paid. And I was smart enough to follow him around. And I literally served the coffee and carried the bags and, whatever. I just wanted to watch him teach. One day he got double booked. He said, "Can you do what I do?" I said, "I don't know." He said, "I'll pay you $1,000 for a day." I was making $15,000 a year. You know what I said? "I'll try." I go to a program in New York City for the Metropolitan Life Insurance Company. They are totally pissed off when I show up because I'm not him, right? But I got ranked first place of all the speakers. So they called him and said, "Send this guy again. He's great." Well, that's how I got into leadership development. And then coaching, there was nothing called coaching.
Yeah.
There was nothing called executive coaching. So I meet this guy many years ago. He's the CEO of a big company. And he said, I got this kid working for us, young, smart, dedicated, hardworking, driven to achieve, arrogant, stubborn jerk. He said it would be worth a fortune to me if this kid would change his behavior. Well, I heard the fortune again. I like those fortunes. I can maybe help. He goes, I doubt it. I said, maybe. Then I came up with an idea. I said, I'll work with the kid for a year. If he gets better, pay me. If you don't get better, it's free. You know what the CEO said? Sold. Since then, all of my work as a coach is done for pay only for results basis. There was nothing called coaching.
Yeah.
There was no field of executive coaching. I just made that up.
Fake it until it becomes reality.
There you go.
A lot of people talk about coaching. It seems like this is a term that gets brought up a lot. I'm actually working on a new book for next year on leadership and vulnerability, and I've interviewed 100 CEOs so far, and a lot of them tell me that they work with coaches now, where I feel like even 5-10 years ago, this would have been a very taboo thing to say. But I still feel like a lot of people don't understand what an executive coach does. Is it the equivalent of therapy for business, or what does a coach actually do? How do you work with executives?
Well, that's a good question because different coaches do clearly different things.
Yeah.
Now, historically, what I've done is I help very successful leaders achieve positive long-term change in their behavior.
Okay.
I'm not an expert at strategy or marketing or communications. It's strictly leadership behavior, and that's been the bulk of what I do. I teach leaders to get feedback, to develop a follow-up process. We developed something called stakeholder-centered coaching. It's been used by tens of thousands of people around the world. So that's what I'm predominantly noted for. As I've grown older, though, a lot of my coaching is quite different now. A lot of it's focused on people's lives.
Yeah.
A third of the people I coach are probably billionaires. So like one guy said, you're worth $4 billion. What am I supposed to do? Bump you up to 4.1? Who cares? He said, you're right. Who cares? I just want to have a better life. So as I've grown older, a lot of the people I work with are obscenely successful now.
Yeah.
And I'm not really trying to help them get to be a little bit more obscenely successful. I'm just trying to help them have a better life.
And when you did the leadership coaching, when that was your primary focus, were there specific behaviors that you would focus on? Or could any leader just come to you and say, hey, I'm trying to be more vulnerable. I'm trying to be more communicative or collaborative. Or was there a specific set of areas that you focused on?
Now, what I did is I gave people confidential feedback. So I interview everyone around my clients. So each one of them is different. So I have no idea what they're going to need to focus on.
Okay.
I interview everyone around my clients, and then they develop a profile, and they tell me. I don't tell them what they need to get better at. So first, I interview my average client, 18 key stakeholders, just average. And so I interview 18 people. This takes a lot of time. Develop a very extensive report. They feel good about this. I want to get better at that. Now, if they're the CEO, they have to get the board to approve what I'm doing. If they're not the CEO, they have to get the CEO to approve it. I'm either working with the CEO or the could-be CEO. That's the only people that hire me. So then somebody above them has to approve what I'm doing because I don't want to work with somebody for a year and then management says, well, they fixed the wrong thing.
Yeah.
So I need to get approval on who are the key stakeholders, what is the key behavior, and then I really help them achieve positive change in behavior as judged by their key stakeholders.
Interesting. And so over the years, what have been some of those common behaviors that CEOs or prospective CEOs are trying to get help on the most?
That's a great question. I was interviewing the Harvard Business Review and asked this question, what is the number one problem of all the people you've coached over the years? And my answer was winning too much.
Yeah.
Now, what does that mean? If it's important, we want to win. Meaningful, we want to win. Critical, we want to win. Trivial, we want to win. And not worth it, we want to win anyway. Yeah. Winners love winning. The people I coach are huge winners in life. And it's very hard for them not to win. I'm going to give you a case study of winning too much that almost all my clients fail. And when I say fail, they fail themselves. You might fail this test yourself. Are you ready? Here's a case study. You want to go to dinner at restaurant X. Your husband, wife, friend, or partner wants to go to dinner at restaurant Y. You have a heated argument. You go to restaurant Y. It was not your choice. The food tastes awful and the service is terrible. Option A, critique the food. Point out our partner was wrong. This mistake could have been avoided if you just listened to me. Option B, shut up. Eat the stupid food. Try to enjoy it and have a nice night. What would I do? What should I do? Almost all my clients, what would I do? Critique the food. What should I do? Shut up.
Yeah.
One of the great people I coach is a man named J.P. Garnier, was CEO of GlaxoSmithKline. I said, what'd you learn about leadership as the CEO of this company? He said, I've learned a hard lesson. Every one of my clients, I teach them this lesson. He said, my suggestions become orders. Now, he said, when you're the CEO, your
Yeah.
suggestions become orders. Now, if they're smart, they're orders. And if they're stupid, they're orders. If I want them to be orders, they're orders. If I don't, they're orders anyway. My suggestions become orders. For 9 years, I trained the admirals in the U.S. Navy. What's the first thing I teach the admirals? You get that star? Your suggestions become orders. Admirals don't make suggestions. They
Yeah.
give orders.
I
They make a
remember.
suggestion. That's it. That's
Yeah.
it. So I asked JP, what'd you learn from me when I was your coach? He said, you taught me one lesson that helped me be a better leader and have a happier life. I said, what was that lesson? He said, before I speak, breathe. I just ask one question. Is it worth it?
Yeah.
Is it worth it? And he said, as a CEO of this company, 50% of the time, you have the discipline to stop and breathe and ask myself, is it worth it? What did I decide? Am I right? Maybe. Is it worth it? No.
Yeah, I remember one CEO I interviewed. He told me they were opening some new some new locations around the country, and he went into one of those locations and he was doing a tour, and he said, "Oh, I really like the art that hangs on this, the way that you decorated this office." And then he went to another headquarters and he noticed that was the exact same art and the exact same design. And he's like, "Wait a minute, didn't you put this at the other location too?" And they said, "Yeah, but you said you really loved it, so we put it here." And he said, "I never said that. I just said that." So they took what he said he liked something, and they assumed that he wanted it everywhere in all the offices.
That's it.
Yeah, it's crazy. So when you work with executives, so you interview on average 18 stakeholders, you get feedback, and it could be around a variety of issues, right? Whether it's, I mean, what are some of the common ones? I guess you said winning too much.
Adding too much value.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, adding too much value, winning too much, trying to be right all the time, basically overselling our points. Sometimes depends on the industry. Like for a young executives, often failure to delegate and scale. Because, the entrepreneur, they're so used to being the entrepreneur and they know everything. It's very hard. One of the great people I coach said that for the great achiever, it's all about me, but for the great leader, it's about them.
Yeah.
Well, it's hard not to be the hero and let them be the heroes, because people have received so much reinforcement. Over in your lives, we've had to take thousands and thousands of tests.
Yeah.
Well, you have one goal: prove how smart you are. It's hard to stop.
Yeah.
It's very hard to stop doing this. Very, very hard to stop. So what I teach people is, and sometimes they need to listen more, give recognition, delegate, just, pretty much common sense things.
Yeah. And so after you get all this information, you go to the CEO, you say, "Hey, here's what I found that I think you need to be working on.
Yeah.
Let's get to work." And so what does the work usually look like for a lot of executives? Is it just meeting with you once a month? Is it?
Well, here's the key. The key is not them seeing me. The key is them working with their key stakeholders.
Okay.
They then have to go back and talk to the key stakeholders and say, here's what I learned. Here's what I feel good about. Here's what I want to do better. They apologize for their previous sins, and they practice something called feed forward. They say, I'm not going to ask you for more feedback about the past. Give me ideas for the future. For example, how can I be a great listener in the future? And then whatever the people say, they sit there, shut up, listen, take notes, and say thank you. Then they keep track of what everybody said, and then they talk to me. Then they do it again and again and again. And I've done a study. If any of your listeners would like, send me an email, marshall@marshallgoldsmith.com. I'll send them a copy of the study. It's called Leadership as a Contact Sport. We got a study with 86,000 people from around the world. When leaders get confidential feedback, they talk to people about what they learn, and they follow up on a rigorous basis, they get better, way better. You know what else our research has proven? If they just go to the course but don't talk to people afterward and don't do any follow-up, their improvement is no better than random chance. So what have I learned? Nobody gets better because they read a book or they hire a coach. You actually have to work.
Yeah.
And if you work, you get better. You don't work, you probably will not get better.
Yeah, there's
so what
no
I've learned
shortcut.
about coaching is, here's a key variable for my success. It's not me, it's the people I coach.
Yeah.
Now, if you got my book, The Earned Life, look at the first 6 pages. Are those impressive people or not impressive people?
Yeah. It was a big list of people that you've worked with and coached over the years.
Those are amazing people.
Yeah.
Well, the key to my success is work with great people. Years ago, one of my coaching classes was Alan Mulally. Alan, probably the greatest corporate leader in the world in the last 30 years. He went to Ford. The stock was at 101. He left was 1837. Stock went, 1,800% while he was the CEO. And even more impressive, 97% approval rating from every employee in a union company. Unheard of for a CEO. Amazing guy. So I talked to Alan. I said, Alan, of all the people I've ever coached, I spent the least amount of time coaching you, and you improved the most, and you were great to start with. I said, the guy I spent the most amount of time with didn't improve at all. I said, I made a chart here, time spent with me and improvement. There was a negative correlation. I said, Alan, the way this chart looks, had you never met me, you'd have been even better. I said, what should I learn about coaching from you? He taught me a great lesson that changed my life. He said, Marshall, your whole job is work with great people. You work with great people, you win.
Yeah.
You work with the wrong people, you lose.
Yeah. And that's great advice for leaders as well for how they build teams, right? I mean, if you bring in great people on your team, then, but at the same time, though, you can't have everybody who's an all-star, right? You can't always, or can you?
Now, let me stop. I didn't say everyone has to have everybody who's an all-star. I didn't say that. You were asking me about who I coach.
Yeah.
All right, read the first 6 pages of the book. That's who I coach.
Yeah.
They are the all-stars.
That's true.
Now, why am I always ranked #1 executive coach in the world? Let's get real. Nobody knows I'm a good coach. Why am I ranked #1 executive coach in the world? Because these people say I am. And I have the best clients in the world.
Yeah.
And by the way, if you read my book, look at the first paragraph of that book before the endorsements. What's it say? Thank you to them.
Yeah.
I only look good because of them. I always say I learned 100 times from them what they learned from me.
Mm-hmm.
That's my lesson as a coach. Don't make it about yourself and your own ego and how smart you think you are. You work with great, dedicated people, you're going to win.
Yeah.
You work with the wrong clients, you're going to lose.
So this is actually a good transition to something I was curious to get your take on. Obviously, the theme of vulnerability has been brought up a lot in the business world over the past few years. When you're working with executives, have you noticed a trend in what gets talked about? I mean, is vulnerability, connecting with people, humility, is this getting more traction from executives? Do they care about this more now than they did 15, 20 years ago?
Definitely.
Yeah.
Peter Drucker, a great management thinker of all time, taught me this. He said, the leader of the past knew how to tell. The leader of the future knows how to ask. Today, you manage people no more than you do. You can't tell them what to do and how to do it. You have to ask, you have to listen, you have to learn, you have to be a human being. So leaders have changed a lot. Now, here's a very interesting, I wrote an article in CEO magazine too. Again, I'd be happy to send it to anyone, but the article in CEO magazine said, leaders are getting better and better and better, and their feedback is getting worse and worse and worse. Why? So somebody asked me, are leaders more bullies today than ever? That is the world's most ridiculous question. Ask the people who built the pyramids about bullies. Yeah, ask them what it was like to have a bully, right? The history of leadership, leaders were awful. Yelling, screaming, beating people. Leaders are nicer than ever, yet the feedback is worse. Why? Employees don't put up with crap anymore. They have open door. They have the internet. They will talk about it. They will challenge you.
Yep.
We live in a different world. In the past, companies could put up with toxic leaders. In the future, they can't.
Yeah.
Let me give an example. Hospitals are the worst. Hospitals are worse. The old medical doctors used to yell and scream at the interns, swear at them, insult them. That's just part of life. Today, no. You can't do that anymore. We live in a different world. By the way, have the complaints about doctors gone down or up in the new world? Up.
Yeah.
Much more complaints. Is their behavior gotten better or worse? Better. Well, we live in a different world. The standards are different today. Yeah,
I was actually curious to ask you about that. It does seem like the standards are very, very different. Do you ever notice that executives are, because there's this big push, like I said, vulnerability, transparency, tell me what you're thinking, what you believe in. But at the same time, it also feels like it's much easier to critique leaders now than ever before. Like you say one wrong thing and people are going to come after you. So how do you balance being authentic and transparent with the fear?
Look, there's a certain point, being authentic to a point. I mean, let's get real here. Life is not an encounter group. You're not going to sit there and share how you feel all day, right?
Yeah.
Let me give you an example. A lot of a CEO job is boring. They've listened to a presentation they've heard 1,500 times before. Everything's been sanitized before they get it. Some young kid is making the presentation. You know what I tell them? You got to look interested. You got to look like you care. If you don't, you're going to break that kid's heart.
Yeah.
That's not being a phony. It's being a professional.
Hmm.
So being authentic means I have values. I believe in the values. I'm doing what I think is right. It doesn't mean I'm sharing my emotions with everyone all day, because sometimes your emotion is you're bored to death. Well, you can't sit there and tell the kid, kid, this presentation is so dull. I've heard it 50 times before. Would you please get done because you're boring the crap out of me? Well, you can't say that is exactly how you feel. But you can't say that. You shouldn't say that. It's not being a professional.
So there's a balance. And it's interesting that you mentioned that, because I feel like on the one hand, there's been a big push towards, these things like radical candor and just share how you're feeling. But at the same time, like you said, if everybody did that inside of organizations, we would just create chaos.
No, you're right. Yeah. So you need to be honest. And at the same time, you need to be professional.
Yeah.
And if you cross the line where your honesty leads to you being unprofessional, it's a very bad idea.
Yeah. Yeah. So how do you balance that transparency with the fear that people might come after you? So for example, let's say you're having to talk about a controversial issue, right? And vaccine mandates was coming up, all these crazy things were coming up, and a lot of leaders were scared to take a stance on certain issues because they didn't want to upset one group or the other. They didn't want people to come after them. Do you have any advice for leaders on how to approach and talk about these difficult things in a way that...
Sure. I just say, imagine anything you're going to say is going to be published in the New York Times and put on the internet for thousands of people to read. Before you say it, get ready for it.
Yeah.
And if you don't want it to be in the New York Times, you don't want thousands of people to read it, don't say it. Welcome to the new world.
Yeah, it's the harsh reality, right? I guess there's no way around it.
It's the new world, right? It is what it is. And by the way, it's not all good or bad. It's good and bad. There's a lot of good here. Let's take the hospitals. The good news is the old doctors don't swear at people and scream at people and yell and act like fools all the time. That's good. The bad news is they've got to walk on eggshells a little bit, because anybody can put something in Glassdoor and on the internet talking about what a jerk they are.
Yeah.
So it's a balance. Now, by the way, you could say it's good or it's bad. To me, it doesn't matter. What I teach my clients is it is. Deal with what is, not what you think should be. I'm a Buddhist. One of the things Buddha always taught is you deal with what is.
Yeah.
Don't waste time on, I shouldn't be this way or that way. What is? And what is I've seen clients get crucified on social media.
Yeah.
Who did absolutely nothing wrong. So, you just have to be careful.
This episode is sponsored by HiBob. Remember what people want today in the future of work. They want to feel connected and like they belong to the company. Bob, the HR platform from HiBob, does just that. Bob is the modern HR platform for how you and your people work today. Check them out and get access to a free guide they just released, which covers using the right technology, inclusivity, and modern HR tools at hibob.com/FOW. Again, that's www.hibob.com/FOW. Yeah, there's, do you remember the story of that CEO who put up a picture of himself on LinkedIn crying about having to do layoffs, like the crying CEO? Did you hear that story?
No.
Yeah, I interviewed him here as well because I was curious to get his thoughts. But he had to lay some people off. Smaller company, it was like 12 or 15 people. Yeah. And he had to lay some people off, and he was so emotional about it that he broke down crying. And he took a picture of himself crying. He wrote the post, put it up on LinkedIn, and said, "This is how I'm feeling, and it makes me very upset." And he just got torn to pieces. Published in every major media outlet. He got the nickname as the crying CEO. They said he's a narcissist. They made the layoffs all about him, and he just got shredded. So it's...
Let me give you an idea to other CEOs who are listening. Don't do that.
Yeah.
Bad idea.
Yeah.
Bad idea.
Yeah.
Bad idea.
Bad taste. So you mentioned something that I was curious to get your thoughts on. I know you are Buddhist, and I really wanted to find out how did you get involved with that? What is it about the Buddhist philosophy that you connect with, and does it make its way into your coaching?
Oh, definitely. Well, I'm not a religious Buddhist. I'm a philosophical Buddhist.
Okay.
So I'm not a metaphysical Buddhist who believes Buddha hopped out of his mother's side and spirits and all that stuff. So for me, Buddhism is a philosophy of life.
Hmm.
And one of the things I teach, for example, is feed forward. Buddha said, only do what I teach if it works for you. If it doesn't work for you, it's okay, don't do it.
Yeah.
In feed forward, I teach every one of my clients to ask for input. They listen to it and they say thank you to people and they don't judge and critique. They never promise to do everything people say. Leadership's not a popularity contest. They do promise to listen and learn. One of my great clients is Hubert Joly. He totally turned around Best Buy.
Yeah.
He practiced feed forward himself. He gets in front of every employee, says, my name is Hubert Joly. I have a coach. I get feedback. Here's what I'm trying to improve. Please help me. And guess what? He expects everyone else to do the same thing.
Yeah.
So that is a very, very Buddhist concept, which is very helpful to me. And it's kind of a centerpiece of all of my coaching. The other Buddhist concept is what we've already discussed. Just accept what is. I mean, that CEO who started crying, he can complain about the world isn't fair and poor me. Well, you know what? It is what it is. You made a mistake. Suck it up. Live with it, right? You didn't come across as a professional and you got crucified. Okay, we all make mistakes. You can blame the world or look in the mirror and take responsibility. What I would say to him is look in the mirror and take some responsibility here.
Yeah. I like that you mentioned Hubert. He was actually on the podcast a couple of weeks ago as well. He's been on the show twice, and he's a fascinating leader. And I think we talked about you briefly in that episode too. So yeah, I like that approach and how it makes its way into your coaching practice. Have you ever had to fire a client, or have you ever had a disaster or a failure with any of your coaching?
Oh, yeah. Oh, look, I'm incredibly selective about who I work with. If I get the feeling the client has an attitude problem, what do I say? Bye-bye. Some people ask me, how do I convince people to change who don't? I don't convince anybody.
Yeah.
I've learned a very hard lesson as a coach. Are you ready? My name is Marshall Goldsmith, not Jesus Christ. I'm not in the savior business here. I don't try to save people. If they don't want to get better, it's okay.
Yeah.
But don't waste my time. I only work with great people who care. If they've got an attitude, I'm not judging them. It's perfectly okay, but bye-bye.
So have you ever had a client that maybe early on in your career, you thought you could make change happen, it didn't work out, you had to fire them? Any horror stories during your career?
Oh, yeah. And you know what the problem was always? I always had exactly the same problem. I only had to look one place to find the source of the problem, in the mirror, right here. I'm an adult. Nobody made me do any of this stuff. If I'm wasting my time coaching somebody who doesn't care, hello, who's got the problem? Who wasted a year and a half of his life without getting paid? Oh, that would be me.
So that's
Who's an
happened to
idiot?
you?
Oh, yeah. I'm the idiot that didn't get paid.
Well, without divulging, confidential information, in the times where it didn't work out, what happened? I mean, because a year and a half is a long time, obviously, to work with somebody. Did you
What
find
happened
that?
is I was an idiot. I was an idiot. I mean, hello, this is a train bound for nowhere. Now, I've only done that a couple of times. I'm not that much of an idiot, but I've been an idiot a few times. And when I was an idiot, it's my fault, not their fault.
So was it just not spotting early on enough that they didn't want to change and they were just kind of doing it to
No, it's
appease?
my own ego. I'm thinking I can save people. I'm going to convince them, blah, 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 blah. Yeah. No, the problem, you keep going back to them.
Yeah.
The problem was never them. The problem was always me.
Ego, huh?
Ego.
It's an interesting thing because from a lot of interviews that I've done, I always ask CEOs, what's the number one thing that can kill leadership? And they always say ego. When your ego gets too big, it's a quick way to just crush your career. Can you talk a little bit about ego? Why is that so dangerous? And what does ego actually mean? Because I still think a lot of people they confuse it with confidence.
It means different things to different people. But let me tell you what Peter Drucker taught me. He said, our mission in life is to make a positive difference, not to prove we're smart, not to prove we're right.
Yeah.
Well, our ego kicks in when we get more focused on proving how smart we are or right we are than making a positive difference in life. Now, if you're trying to prove how great you are, and that's going to help you make a positive difference, then that's not too much ego.
Yeah.
That's smart. If you're trying to prove how great you are and it's not making a positive difference, that is bad. Now, I want to talk about ego from two perspectives. In my new book, The Earned Life, I talk about the importance of marketing yourself and building credibility. And I say credibility must be earned twice. One, you have to do great work, and two, you have to be seen as doing great work, which are two different things.
Yeah.
Now, let's take Hubert. Hubert promoted the crap out of his book. That's why he was on your show.
Yep.
I talked to Hubert before he wrote the book. I said, Hubert, most CEOs that write a book, they're too proud to go out and promote it.
Yeah.
They're too proud. They'd be too proud to be on your show. They're too proud to go out and promote the book. And I said, if you're writing the book, sell the book. Get out there and work hard, sell the book. And if you don't get out and sell the book, you're too proud to sell the book, don't write it in the first place. I'm so proud of him. To me, that's not a big ego.
Yeah.
That's just the right amount of ego. He was out there promoting that book because he's trying to help the world be better. He doesn't need the money. He's not doing this for status or fame. He's trying to make the world a better place. That is healthy ego. You're trying to promote something and it's going to make the world better. Now, in my book, What Got You Here Won't Get You There, the problem is typically what you've talked about, too much ego. You're used to interviewing CEOs. You're exactly right. CEOs, a typical problem, too much ego. On the other hand, 80% of all humans, the problem is not too much ego. The problem is they don't promote themselves enough. See, my book, What Got You Here Won't Get You There, was about me coaching CEOs, and my findings were exactly what yours are.
Yeah.
I now work with a lot of other people who are not so famous and successful. They undersell themselves. So now I try to, when I teach, I ask people, is your natural tendency to oversell or undersell? And about 80% of the people I meet, especially people like coaches, HR people, they undersell.
Yeah.
So for everyone that undersells, I've got 3 great questions. Are you ready for the undersellers?
Yes.
And by the way, my book, How Women Rise, that's much more about underselling than overselling. I wrote that with Sally Helgson. Fantastic book. I can say it because she wrote it, not me. A fantastic book. I love it. I'm just honored to be part of the book. She's an amazing woman. But back to underselling. I ask people that say they undersell 3 questions. Number 1, if you became more influential and powerful, would the world be worse off or better off? Well, they invariably say, well, better off. I say, great. Do you feel uncomfortable trying to be more influential? Yes, it makes me uncomfortable. I say, question 3, what's more important to you? Making the world a better place or being comfortable? Get over it. If you want to make the world a better place, you need to get out there and promote yourself. And you mentioned Hubert. I'm so proud of him. That's what he did.
Yep.
And his book is very successful. He's, by the way, I've done 80 podcasts about my book. Why? I'm trying to promote the book. I think it's a great book. It's going to help people. To me, that's not a big ego. That's a smart ego.
Is underselling the same thing as imposter syndrome?
It's related, but not exactly the same. Yeah. Okay. Sometimes sometimes you can undersell because your ego is actually too big too. You know what that sounds like? Have you ever heard this phrase before? My good work should speak for itself.
Yes, of course.
Well, that is a nonsense phrase. My good work. If that were true, no company would need a marketing function.
Yeah.
No, their good work would just speak for itself. By the way, on Amazon, there are 33 million books. 33 million. How many books do you have to sell in 1 year to be in the top half of all books? Do you know the answer?
I have no idea.
2.
Really?
Half of them sold 0 or 1 in a year. Now, by the way, that doesn't mean they're bad books.
Yeah.
16 million is a big number. I am not arrogant enough to believe that my books are better than 16 million other books that sold no copies. Nobody read the book.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. Makes complete sense. One of the things that you talk about in your new book is the phrase "I am," and why that is such a dangerous phrase to say. Yep. And I wanted to get your insight on that as to why, because I have 2 kids. I have a soon-to-be, she just turned 6, and my son is 2, so 2-year-old and a 6-year-old. And I find that sometimes they say that, sometimes I say that. Why is that so dangerous?
Well, basically, we put ourselves in a stereotypical box. So let's say I'm coaching someone and they say, I'm a terrible listener, I'm a bad listener, I've never been able to listen. Well, what I say is, why not? You got something stuck in your ears? Do you have an incurable genetic defect that is prohibiting you from being a good listener? See, as long as you say that's just the way I am, guess what? you're probably never going to change. And it's even goes deeper than this. Let's say I'm coaching you and your self-image is I'm a bad listener. And I work with you for a year and you get great feedback on being a good listener. If I haven't helped you understand your identity or your stereotyping, on the inside, you feel like a phony. You feel on the
Yeah.
inside, that's not the real me. See, the real me is a bad listener. That's not the real me.
Yeah.
It is the real you. Just quit putting yourself in a stupid box.
Yeah. And
And
I
by the
guess,
way, with kids, we do this all the time. Siblings, the smart one, the stupid one, the funny one, the happy one, the good singing one. Interesting statistic. Twins that are brought up, identical twins brought up by different parents, are more similar than identical twins brought up by the same parents. Why? The parents make up differences so they can identify the kids. He's the blah, blah one, or she's the such and such one. And they actually make up these differences to help them identify who the kid is.
wow. So I guess instead of saying I am, what do you say?
The question is, what do you want to be?
Yeah.
And also, what did you used to be? You can say, I used to be a terrible listener. That's okay. You know, when you say I am a terrible listener, though, what's it mean? I can't change.
Yeah.
The only people that can't change behavior have incurable genetic defects. Assuming you do not have an incurable genetic defect, you can change by definition.
Yeah, I suppose this is the difference between the fixed mindset and a growth mindset, right? One of the things that I think Carol Dweck talked about a lot in her
Right.
book too, which is interesting because you do hear a lot of people say, I can't, I am. And after reading your book, when I hear those words, I immediately pick up on it and I'm like, yeah, that's not quite true.
And you don't have to continue being.
Yeah.
Now, basically, here's the important point. Maybe what you have been in the past has done pretty good. And maybe you don't have to change. That's okay. The point is, one person wrote a brilliant book. I forget his name. It was called What Got You Here Won't Get You There.
Yeah.
Well, if you want to go to a new place, maybe you need to do something different. And maybe what got you here won't get you there.
You also mentioned this idea of the stereotype of leaders. And I think one of the things a lot of people are struggling with, so at least one of the things that I found interesting from the research that I'm involved in now. So I interviewed all these CEOs and I asked them, when you became a leader, what was the stereotype? And they all said, confident, knowledgeable, strong, don't show emotion. And I said, okay, well, you're a CEO now. Is that stereotype of leadership correct? And they say, oh, no, that stereotype of leadership is completely wrong. But I find that interesting because when people become CEOs and executives, they know that that stereotype of leadership is wrong, yet that stereotype of leadership still exists everywhere. So how do you change that stereotype of leadership and evolve it into something else? Like, why isn't the stereotype of leadership, oh, you're so great at connecting with people, you care about human beings, you focus on growth. Why is it the command and control? How do we change that?
Well, number one, it has changed. It's changed dramatically over time.
Yeah.
I mean, that question, how do you change that? Go back and look at history, please. Yeah, go back and look at the history of the world, the history of a hospital, the history of anything. That was command and control.
Yeah.
That was real command and control. They had whips. They had kings. They chopped your head off. That was command and control. What you see now is nothing like that. Yet the world has changed. That's my whole point earlier in the article I wrote for CEO Magazine or Chief Executive Magazine. People's expectations are completely different. Look, if I manage you and you have no choice but to do what you're told, I can act like a bully and get away with it. If I manage you and you can get a better job someplace else, you'll tell me to screw off and leave. It's a different world. Leaders are not worse. Leaders are better, way better. The feedback is worse.
It's such an interesting paradox. I suppose that part of it is we want more change faster, and we don't acknowledge that change has happened and that things have transformed. But we want more, faster, and it's just not meeting those expectations.
Well, the reality is you interviewed a bunch of CEOs, right?
Yep.
Did they all impress you as a bunch of bully jerks?
No, that's what is so crazy. A lot of them, you interview them and they've told me sacrifices they've made, personal stories of divorce that they've had to go through and how their team members cared for. It's complete exact opposite.
Exactly. Well, the reality is the very CEOs you interviewed are much more likely to be criticized as being bullies than the CEO 30 years ago who was much worse.
Yeah. Well, hopefully the gap will close, and maybe one day we'll wake up and realize the leaders today are not so bad, because it's also the data, right? You see the engagement scores that are like terrible all the time.
Let's talk about engagement scores.
Yeah.
Now, I have some real issues with that whole topic.
Oh, please.
Every employee engagement survey asks something called passive questions.
Yes.
Now, when you ask anybody a passive question and they have a negative answer, they blame the environment. So what are people taught? They're basically taught to complain. They're taught, if I'm not engaged, it's not my fault. The company's mean. My boss is mean.
Yep.
My daughter, Kelly, who's a professor, she got a PhD from Yale. She taught me about active questions. Get people to ask every day, did I do my best to? For example, every day, do you ask yourself, did I do my best to be engaged? As opposed to saying, did the company engage me? Did I do my best to engage myself every day? Did I do my best to find meaning every day?
Yeah.
Did I do my best to build positive relationships every day? So really get people to take a little personal responsibility for their own engagement, as opposed to just be helpless victims who do nothing but blame the world.
Yeah, I really like that approach, because you're right. I mean, a lot of people show up to work and they say, where's my sense of purpose and meaning? Where's my engagement? It's as if they have to look for it in their company, but we forget that we play an active role in shaping our engagement, in creating that purpose and meaning and that impact. And it's very frustrating to hear that all the time.
Look, I've got 11 million frequent flyer miles on American Airlines. Typical flight. One flight attendant is positive, motivated, upbeat, enthusiastic, wants everybody to have a great experience. One is negative, bitter, angry, and cynical. They're on the same plane.
Yep.
They have the same uniform, the same customers. They all went to the same employee engagement program. What's the difference? The difference is not the outside. It's on the inside.
Yeah.
By the way, one of the great leaders I worked with is Gary Ridge. Gary was CEO of WD-40.
Oh, yeah, I spoke with him too.
Gary's a wonderful guy. I love Gary. His employee engagement scores were among the highest in the world. I worked with another CEO of a children's hospital. Their scores are not as high as WD-40.
Yeah.
Now, there's no way I can say making WD-40 is more important than curing cancer for children. On the other hand, their scores on finding meaning at work are actually higher than the children's hospital. Why? They create meaning.
Yeah. So I suppose that people, and I like the message that people who are watching and listening to this need to have more accountability in their own lives and in their own careers, instead of assuming that everything is external, which I think is what we keep teaching everybody, is that you're not engaged because your company's not doing X, Y, Z. You don't have purpose.
By the way, the companies should try to do these good things.
Yeah, of course.
They should. On the other hand, to sit there and say it's all them and none me is wrong.
Yeah. There needs to be a balance, right? Everybody plays a role, just like on a sports team. Everybody plays a role. And when you come together, magical things can happen, but you can't just blame the offense or the defense. Everybody kind of needs to have a seat.
Yeah, or the coach. I didn't try really hard, but it wasn't my fault because the coach didn't motivate me.
Yeah. I love that. I hope you enjoyed that episode with Marshall Goldsmith. Make sure to subscribe to the show if you want to get the bonus episode with Marshall, where he talks about finding purpose and meaning, the 6 crucial questions you should ask yourself every day to lead a better life, and how leaders can motivate their teams to recognize their people. The cost is only $4.99 a month, or less than $50 for the entire year. Imagine how much value you can get from this. This is less than the cost of a cup of coffee a month. So would you rather have a couple cups of coffee or mentoring and coaching from some of the world's top business leaders and CEOs? If you subscribe, not only will you get an amazing episode each week from one of my guests, you will also get ad-free listening and early access to new episodes. I hope that's enough to convince you to subscribe and support the show.